It's taken almost 2 decades, but Russian efforts to join the World Trade Organization were coming to fruition on Friday. Russia, the only member of the group of 20 major world economies not in the WTO, was set to join the Global Trade Club at a ceremony in Switzerland. The organization aims to liberalize and regulate trade and can impose sanctions against countries that break the rules. Lifting trade barriers is likely to stimulate and diversify trade between Russia and the rest of the world. Analysts are divided on whether this will benefit Russia, but advocates say it could represent a multi-billion-dollar boost for the economy. Speaking in Moscow, Russian Foreign Ministry spokesman Alexander Lukashevich said it would be a boon for business.
Russia is joining the organization under conditions which meet its national interests. This means creating a background for the further improvements of our investment climate, for foreign investments inflow and expansion of Russian exports, while supporting the key domestic economy sectors. This means a new stage of our country's integration to the world's economic system and its key institutions.
WTO membership is expected to impact everything from agriculture to the oil and gas sector that dominates Russian exports. Russia is the third biggest buyer of goods from Europe. Lower tariffs could see high street prices come down. Karel de Gucht, the European Union Trade Commissioner, predicts more business with Europe's giant neighbour to the east.
Advantage I see is that for Russia it will be possible to attract more foreign capital because their accession to the WTO will give them assurances they work in a legal environment that is more transparent than it was before. So I expect our trade with Russia to rise considerably. Whether that will mean doubling within 5 or 10 years, I mean that's a statement, of course, but we will see. But I trust that yes, our trade will considerably go up.
But not everyone is so enthusiastic. Leaders of the automotive industry lobbied against joining for fear of foreign car makers overtaking the home market. While there may be pain in the short term, advocates of WTO membership say Russia badly needs a shake-up. They say that more competition will make manufacturers raise standards and pressure officials to tackle the country's corruption epidemic. Viktor Vekselba, head of Russia's Golkovo Innovation Center, takes a wait-and-see approach.
A lot
still needs to be done in terms of understanding what WTO membership will bring to Russia. We must open our eyes to what we pay for a ticket to this trade club. The top question is of balance, and I'm sure positive effects will outweigh the negative ones. WTO entry will open up great opportunities for the Russian economy in the long run.
Georgia had tried to block Russia's WTO entry since the two countries fought a short war in 2008. Swiss negotiators brokered a deal between the two countries earlier this year, removing the final obstacle to Russia's accession. That deal hinges on international monitoring of trade along the mutual borders of Abkhazia and South Ossetia. Those two provinces have broken away from Georgia and are recognized as independent states by Moscow. WTO membership needs to be ratified by the Russian parliament and may still face a hurdle in the United States, where Cold War-era legislation hampers trade with Russia. To probe some of the issues surrounding Russia's WTO membership, I spoke to Michael Hindley, a former member of the European Parliament. I started by asking him whether joining the trade club will be win-win for Russia.
Well, I wouldn't go that far. It's certainly a win-win for the WTO. I have reservations about what the impact of membership on the domestic economy, but it's something nonetheless which I very much welcome. I'm very pleased that this overlong procedure has come to an end and that Russia is now a member of the major body which draws up the rules for world trade.
From the point of view of the Russian consumer, they're presumably hoping to see cheaper goods in stores.
It doesn't automatically pass on. It certainly means that Russian goods will have to be more competitive, and that does bring downward pressure, obviously, on prices, but it doesn't automatically pass on to the consumer, and it does put pressure on Russian producers.
What about the reduction of subsidies on oil and gas? Isn't that going to be the boost towards diversification that Russia's economy needs?
It is. This is double-edged. Again, the pressure of outside competition, the removal or pressure to remove subsidies is good and will help the consumer. The other side of this, though, is that any moves towards, say, privatization, different systems of ownership, breaking up of state monopolies, has its ideological downside, because really it's for the Russian government to convince its population to move in that direction. I'm always wary of any government having the possibility to use external pressure as an excuse for doing these things. You see, it's up to the Russian government to convince the population to break up some of the state controls. However, it's passing the buck if the Russian government is going to say, well, we don't want to do it, but we have to do it to stay in line with the WTO. So it's not our fault, it's the fault of the big, bad WTO in Geneva.
The Russian auto industry, they were one of the lobby groups fighting against Russia joining the WTO. Have they been won over yet?
This is a difficult one. I remember a number of years ago, I was in Nizhny Novgorod and looking at the impact of WTO membership on particularly regional centres and regional centres of manufacturing. And they were greatly worried about the truck divisions that they have there. And again, that worry is justified, because I'm still not convinced that Russian industry is competitive enough to challenge the open door that is now going to be there for other manufacturers to come in. The other impact as well, which was looked at in that study some years ago now in Nizhny, was that the one sector that is missing out on under the WTO is, of course, labour. It's not simply that the Russian automobile industry is less competitive, but Russian labour is also going to be much less competitive, and there's going to be some more downward pressure on wage levels in Russian manufacturing, which will have a knock-on social standards.
But isn't this the point of accession, that it's going to improve the business climate, it's going to force Russia's industries to become more competitive and tackle, for example, corruption, which has been one of the biggest deterrents to foreign investment over the years?
Those are all welcome, but I'd reiterate my caveat. What can go wrong is if there will be a fallout. There will be people who suffer in their standards of living and as workers. And if the buck is passed by the Russian government and this becomes all the fault of those big bad international institutions in Geneva, then this could have some repercussions, because, as you know, many people inside and outside Russia are concerned about the rise of nationalism. And we see this throughout the European Union as sections of society feel squeezed out of the liberalized trading world. They're likely to blame not their own governments, but they're likely to blame the international institutions. So at a time when Russia is taking further steps to join the world community, I wouldn't like to see the negative impact of joining the WTO impact in a bad way on how Russian citizens view the outside world.
That was Michael Hindley, a former member of the European Parliament and expert on the World Trade Organization.